My name is Noelle. And 3 weeks ago, my younger sister sent me an email that stopped me cold. It was short. No greeting. No explanation. Just a subject line that read, "Livestream link for the ceremony." She asked me not to come to her wedding, just to watch it online, like some distant family friend. Not the person who had paid for most of the event. I reread it 3 times. I'm thinking maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a second email. One with a reason or a softening apology. Something to explain how I went from maid of honor to silent observer. But there was nothing else. I was the one who covered the venue deposit. The catering. Even the engraved invitations she claimed she couldn't afford, but always dreamed of. In total, I had spent more than 80% of the wedding budget. I wasn't doing it for recognition. I thought I was doing it because I loved her. But when I saw that link, just sitting there with no warmth and no care, something shifted. It wasn't sadness at first. It was disbelief. Like I had accidentally walked into a version of my life where none of the things I did actually mattered. I remember just sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. The smell of leftover coffee had gone stale in the air. And the hum of the fridge was the only sound. I hadn't even closed the spreadsheet where I had tracked every vendor payment. Every transaction logged under my name. Part of me thought, this has to be a mistake. There's no way she means it like that. But then I remembered the last phone call we had, where she told me, again, to stop overthinking and just let the professionals handle it. I was the one footing the bill, yet somehow I had become the one getting in the way. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't call. I just sat there with a weight in my chest that wasn't quite pain. But wasn't nothing either. I kept thinking, is this really happening? And if it is, then when did I become the person no one cared to include, but everyone counted on to make things happen? That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry. Not yet. I was stuck in the space between disbelief and realization. Between knowing something was deeply wrong and not quite being ready to admit that it had been wrong for a long time. What do you do when the people closest to you decide you're more useful silent than seen? What happens when you realize you've been needed but never really wanted? This isn't the story of a wedding. It's the story of the moment I stopped apologizing for existing in the room I paid to build. The first transfer was $20,000. It felt big, but not outrageous. My sister had cried on the phone, said the venue would slip through their fingers if they didn't put down the deposit by Monday. I remember saying it was fine, that I'd take care of it. I even added a smiley face to the confirmation text. Like I was the cheerful financial fairy of the family. Then came the florist, the planner, the caterer. Cake tastings I didn't attend but paid for. Call after call filled with, "Can you just handle it?" And "we figured you wouldn't mind." Somewhere in between. The total climbed past 40,000. And nobody ever asked if I was okay with it. They just assumed I was. I told myself I didn't need to be thanked. That helping was what family did. But every time I heard my name mentioned, it was never followed by appreciation. Just logistics. Just delegation. It was as if I had become a department, not a person. Most of the time, I wasn't even consulted. They'd email me after decisions were made, just to let me know where the next invoice was going. My input wasn't needed. Only my credit card. One day, on a 3-way call with my mom and Olivia, they were arguing about centerpiece designs. I tried to speak up, to say maybe the velvet linens felt like too much. But my mom cut me off. "Let Olivia decide," she said. "You're not the one getting married." I remember sitting in my car outside the grocery store after that call. Hands still on the wheel. Engine running. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the dashboard and realized I didn't know how to respond anymore. Every time I tried to set a boundary, it was interpreted as being dramatic. Every suggestion I offered was labeled controlling. The irony is, I never wanted control. I just wanted to be seen. To be treated like more than a wallet with opinions, There was a night, maybe a month before the email, where I sent the last large payment. It was for the photography team Olivia insisted on hiring. The one she said would make their wedding look like a magazine spread. I wired Zeben 200 and then sat alone in my apartment, finishing cold Chinese takeout while she FaceTimed my mom and cried tears of joy over the mood board. I wasn't on that call. I wasn't included in the excitement. But the confirmation email came to me. The further we got into the planning, the more I disappeared. I wasn't asked about what time worked for me, whether I'd feel comfortable flying out early to help with the setup. I wasn't looped in when changes were made. I was simply expected to keep saying yes. And I did. For longer than I want to admit. I said yes because it was easier than explaining why I didn't want to. I said yes because being useful felt like the only form of love I knew how to receive from them. I thought, if I just kept showing up, maybe one day they'd see me as more than the dependable sister who always came through. But I was wrong. I was never invited into the circle. I was held just close enough to pay for it. It took me months to realize that the problem wasn't just their behavior. It was my silence. Every time I said nothing, I reinforced the idea that it was okay, that I could carry more, that I would always say yes. And somewhere in the middle of all those transactions, I lost track of how much it was costing me. Not just money, but pieces of myself I didn't even notice were being handed over. Every unchecked boundary, every shrug and smile, every time I swallowed a question. It's strange how clearly you see things in hindsight. Like walking back through a house you once lived in, now empty, and noticing the cracks in the ceiling that were always there, but you never let yourself look at. I didn't know it then. But every dollar I sent was buying me clarity. The kind of clarity that hurts, but frees you at the same time. That evening, I sat on the patio behind my house. Barefoot. Cardigan pulled around me, even though the spring air didn't call for it. The wine glass on the table was still full, untouched since I poured it. I wasn't sad exactly, but something about the stillness of the night made everything louder inside my head. My phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Just one line. Thanks again for covering the photographer. The pictures turned out gorgeous. I opened the shared folder she attached, already knowing what I wouldn't see. 17 photos from last weekend's bridal brunch. I appeared in two. In one, I was a blur in the background, mid-step, pouring champagne. In the other, just my shoulder, half out of frame. The rest were close-ups of Olivia, surrounded by smiling friends and curated sunlight. I stared at the caption she wrote. So grateful to everyone who made this moment so special. I wasn't named. I wasn't tagged. But I had paid for the entire shoot. My name was on the contract. My card on file. There was something surgical about it. The way I had been erased, not with cruelty, but with clean, practiced ease. Like they had done this before. Like they didn't even need to try hard anymore. I put the phone down gently, screen face down on the table. Then I leaned back in my chair and listened. Not to music. Not to traffic. Just the wind. The faint clink of the neighbor's wind chime. A distant dog barking once. Then silence again. It was the first time in months that I could hear my own thoughts without interruption. And what I heard wasn't anger. It was confusion. Why was I sitting here? So far removed from a celebration I helped build? Why was it that the more I gave, the more invisible I became? I used to think showing up mattered. That being the helper, the fixer, the person who quietly held it all together was enough to be valued. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe being useful isn't the same as being loved. The breeze picked up and carried the scent of rosemary from my garden. I had planted it last year. After a rough patch at work, thinking maybe nurturing something would bring me clarity. It didn't. Not then. But tonight, in this quiet, it did something else. It reminded me that things can grow in silence. That some things thrive when no one's watching. I pulled my legs up onto the chair, knees hugged to my chest. and stared at the dark sky. No stars. Just that low-hanging kind of gray that feels heavy but honest. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I just sat there, holding still. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't trying to be included. I was just trying to hear myself again. I sat on the farthest bench in Lincoln Park, the one under the broken light near the edge of the pond. It had been mine since college. A quiet spot no one really noticed, which made it perfect. I didn't come for the view. I came because it helped me think without trying. That night, my thoughts circled back to a dinner 6 years ago. I had just received the Rising Star Award at my firm. It was a big deal, even if no one in my family really understood what it meant. I brought the plaque with me, tucked in a gift bag like a kid showing off a perfect report card. We ate at Olivia's place. Mom complimented her new curtains, then asked if she was finally moving in with her boyfriend. I remember laughing nervously, holding the plaque awkwardly in my lap like it was something fragile and embarrassing. No one asked about it. No one noticed I had brought it. Back then, I made excuses for them. They don't know how to show pride. I told myself, they mean well. Maybe Olivia needs the spotlight more. I kept rewriting their indifference as a form of love I just hadn't learned to recognize yet. But sitting on that bench now, I saw it clearly. It wasn't love. It was a pattern. A quiet diminishing I had allowed for years, because I thought being small made everything easier. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through saved voicemails. There it was. One from my mother. Left the night. I told her I was thinking about starting my own firm. Her voice was soft. Slower than usual. Maybe tired. She said she was proud of me. Then added, almost like a footnote, that Olivia was their last shot at having a normal family. I had listened to that message a dozen times. Maybe more. Each time it stung. But I told myself it was fuel. I thought it pushed me to work harder, to prove I belonged. But tonight, it didn't feel like fuel. It felt like a weight I no longer needed. I hovered over the screen, then tapped delete. No prompt. No warning. Just gone. And somehow, in that tiny act, I felt lighter than I had in years. I arrived 20 minutes early to the rehearsal dinner, dressed in dove gray. Understated, but clean. It wasn't flashy, but it felt put together. I didn't want attention. Not really. Though a small part of me still hoped someone might look at me and see effort, presence. The hotel lobby was already buzzing with staff and soft music. Near the ballroom entrance, a printed easel sign read Olivia and Jake's rehearsal dinner. Beneath it, in cursive script, was a list of acknowledgements. Special thanks to Jake's parents, close family friends, the planning team, and Ember Events. I read it twice. My name wasn't there. Not even in passing. Not even a casual mention. I stood for a moment, pretending to fix my earring as people passed behind me. Laughing. Complimenting the floral arch set up just beyond the doors. Sabine, the coordinator, walked by holding her clipboard, smiling at someone across the room. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did. And kept walking. She found me a few minutes later. Said the ballroom looked incredible. I nodded. Glad it came together. I replied. She smiled again, already turning to field a question from one of the servers. That was the thing with her. Always polite. Always gone before the second sentence. I stepped inside and let my eyes adjust. The room was stunning. I'll give them that. Tall arrangements of blush and ivory roses on every table. Custom name cards in gold foil. The lighting had a softness to it. Like the whole space was designed for photos, not people. I found my card at table 14. It was near the back of the room, pushed against a wall that led to the staff hallway. From my seat, I could see the door to the restrooms. Every time someone walked through, the scent of bleach and citrus cleaner floated over the table. Across the room, Olivia stood beside Jake, glowing under soft uplighting. People circled them like satellites, glasses of wine in hand, already posing for photos. I watched as someone snapped a shot, just as Olivia raised her glass for a toast. Everyone looked perfect in that frame. Everyone but me. Because I wasn't in it. From where I sat, I couldn't even see the head table directly. I had a better view of the stack of high chairs against the wall than of the bride. There were no decorations back here. No candles. No centerpiece. Just a folded napkin. A bless card. And a chair with a wobble. My seatmate was a cousin I hadn't seen since high school and a woman I didn't recognize. She leaned in, smiled, and said, "You're the sister." Right, the question floated in the air like a test. Her tone wasn't cruel. Just casual. Distant. As if I might be a distant relative. Or the florist. I smiled. Said, "Yes." Then returned to my salad. I barely ate. A few bites of arugula. A sip of water. The music played. The servers passed trays. The camera flashes continued. Across the room, laughter bubbled up near the head table. Toasts were made. No one looked my way. Eventually, I folded my napkin, stood slowly, and tapped my cousin's shoulder. "Long day. I'm heading out early." She nodded, already looking at her phone. I walked out without anyone stopping me. The valet brought my car within minutes. I sat behind the wheel. Engine off. Headlights catching on the side of the building. My hands were still. My chest was still. But my thoughts weren't. I kept thinking about that list at the entrance. The acknowledgement sign. How I'd read it twice. As if my name might magically appear the second time. As if they'd simply forgotten a line. But they hadn't. They had put me exactly where they believed I belonged. Out of the shot. Out of the way. Not excluded. Just invisible. And that hurt more than I expected. Because it told me something I hadn't wanted to believe. That this wasn't an accident. It wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. And choices tell you everything. I drove home in silence. Didn't turn on music. Didn't check my phone. When I got inside, I set my clutch on the couch, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. Not angry. Not even bitter. Just clear. They didn't even have to say it aloud. The placement said enough. The absence of my name. The distance of my seat. The polite smiles that didn't linger. The careful orchestration of everything beautiful just not for me. That night, I didn't fall apart. I didn't spiral. I just understood something I'd been avoiding for a long time. You don't have to be hated to be erased. Sometimes, all it takes is silence. And placement. I wore the lavender dress because it made me feel quiet in a way that still carried presence. It was simple. Soft neckline. Clean lines. Not too bold. When I first tried it on, I remember thinking it struck the right balance, elegant enough to be seen. Gentle enough not to be noticed too much. I didn't want to stand out. I just didn't want to disappear. The cocktail reception was hosted at a boutique venue downtown, filled with glassware, curated lighting, and people who smiled like they were posing for a lifestyle blog. As I stepped inside, the scent of roses and expensive cologne hung in the air. I gave my name at the door. Noelle. Just that. No title. No relation. The hostess nodded and handed me a name tag. 5 minutes in, I noticed it. 3 members of the catering staff wore uniforms nearly identical to my dress. Same hue. Same length. Same neckline. At the bar, a woman nudged her friend and said, "Didn't know the servers were off the clock tonight." Her friend laughed. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn. But the heat in my chest stayed with me the rest of the night. Across the room, I saw Sabine doing what she always did, hovering. Scanning. Clipboard in hand. Our eyes met briefly, not with apology. Just recognition. She knew. I knew. We both said nothing. I left 20 minutes later. Smiled when expected. Nodded through small talk. Took a sip of sparkling water. Then slipped out quietly. On the way out, one of the valets asked, "You done for the night?" "Miss," I smiled. "More than you know. At home." I didn't turn on the lights. The city outside cast enough glow through the windows to move through the room. I changed into an old sweatshirt. Pulled my hair back. And sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. Logged into the finance dashboard. The final payment, $41,000, was queued. Scheduled to release at 7 a.m. The next morning, I stared at the screen. 10 minutes? Maybe 11? My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Then, quietly, I clicked cancel. A prompt appear? "Are you sure? This action cannot be undone." "Yes." I closed the browser. Exhaled slowly. The weight I had been carrying didn't vanish. But it shifted. Back where it belonged. Quiet people make the cleanest cuts. The bank opened at 9. But I was there by 8:45. Waiting in my car with the folder on the passenger seat. I hadn't worn makeup. My hair was pulled back. Neutral blues. Flat shoes. I didn't want to be noticed. I wanted to be heard. Carlos, the branch manager, greeted me with a warm professionalism he always carried. He led me to his office. Offered water. Then sat across from me as I slid the folder across the desk. Inside were printed copies of every agreement I had signed. Every deposit I had authorized. Every transaction linked to my name. "I'd like to formally cancel the remaining vendor payments related to this event," I said. My voice didn't waver. I didn't elaborate. Carlos looked through the documents, nodding slowly. "We can do that. There may be some late penalties. Given the timeline, I understand." He paused, then leaned forward slightly. "Do you want us to notify the vendors?" I shook my head. "No. They'll figure it out." He didn't ask anything else. Just typed what he needed. Printed what required signatures. And handed me a pen. I signed with steady strokes. No hesitation. No second thoughts. As he gathered the documents, he glanced up. "You look different today." I smiled. "Just barely. I feel different." He slid the papers into a fresh folder and pushed it toward me. "All set. If anything escalates, let us know." "They won't escalate," I said as I stood. "They don't argue with consequences. They just ignore them until it's too late." Outside, the morning was bright. The air had a sharpness to it that felt honest. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look back at the building. I walked to my car like I'd just shut a door behind me that no longer needed to exist. My phone buzzed just after noon with a message from my cousin Mallory. "Everyone's already on Zoom. They just want to talk." The link followed. Like an obligation wrapped in courtesy. I knew what it meant. They weren't calling to ask. They were calling to correct. I waited a few minutes before tapping the link. When the screen loaded, faces popped into place like a courtroom I hadn't agreed to enter. My mother was already speaking. Her tone smooth but edged. Olivia sat in a bridal robe. Perfect posture. Jaw clenched. My Uncle Ray looked bored. Jake, the groom, held a mug in front of his mouth like a shield. No one asked how I was. No one asked why I hadn't responded. They went straight to the script. My mother started with concern. "Sweetheart, you've always been the one we could count on. This just isn't like you." Uncle Ray added his piece. "Talking over here. It's not about you. It's about the family. Pulling out like this, what are we supposed to think?" Jake opened his mouth. But Olivia stopped him with a hand. She turned to the camera, her voice calm and rehearsed. "You've always been jealous. Let's just say it. Every time something good happens to me, you find a way to make it about you. And this proves it." The words landed but they didn't hit like they used to. I waited until they paused. Then I unmuted myself. Let's be clear. I said, I didn't cancel your wedding. I canceled my funding. The silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was offended. My mother gasped softly. Olivia rolled her eyes. You're ruining the most important day of my life. I kept my voice steady. No. I'm just done being the ATM who doesn't ask for a receipt. Uncle Ray muttered something about being dramatic. I didn't even look at him. I'm tired of being told I'm too much every time I finally notice how little I'm allowed to take up. I said. Then I clicked leave meeting. The screen blinked. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was clean. Final? Not the kind you beg to fill again. I didn't wait for the fallout. I had already lived through the impact. This was just the aftershock of someone finally meaning what they said. The letter wasn't dramatic. No bold fonts. No angry words. Just a simple, quiet document from my lawyer confirming the withdrawal of all funding. The cancellation of vendor contracts tied to my name. And a formal instruction to cease services immediately. It arrived in Sabine's hands at 11:23 a.m., handed off by a courier with impeccable timing. She read it once, then again slower, her fingers tightening on the page as she stepped out of view, already dialing her phone. I wasn't there to see what followed, but I didn't need to be. I imagined the sound of trays being paused mid-setup, flowers being wheeled back out, catering staff blinking at halted timelines, champagne bottles untouched. I pictured Olivia still in the bridal suite, half her hair pinned up, waiting for someone to tell her the ceremony was no longer happening. I imagined mascara still sitting on the counter, unopened. There was no satisfaction in the fallout. No thrill. Just a release. I didn't do it to punish. I did it to stop pretending. They wanted a perfect backdrop. I left them the echo. At home, I sat on the couch wrapped in a soft blanket, hands cupped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The street outside was quiet, the kind of stillness that feels earned. I didn't refresh social media. I didn't look for updates. I didn't need to see the ripple, because I already knew the cause. My phone buzzed once. A single message. Just a heart emoji. No name. I deleted it without opening. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The kind that doesn't need a witness to be real. The flight to Denver was quiet. No turbulence. No conversation. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I didn't write a long post or explain what I was doing. I just packed a single suitcase, locked the door behind me, and walked away from a life that had asked too much, without asking how I was. I checked into a small boutique hotel near Capitol Hill. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like no one had ever raised their voice inside it. The front desk clerk handed me a key card and a city map I didn't need. "You're all set," she said. I nodded. I was. The first morning, I wandered into the garden terrace behind the building. The tables were unbalanced and the cushions slightly faded. But it didn't matter. I brought my tea out there and sat beneath a tree that dropped leaves without apology. It felt like the right kind of mess. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait for updates. I didn't look for the version of the story they were telling without me. Because for the first time in a long time, their story wasn't mine. Denver was cool for May. A sharpness in the wind I hadn't felt in Chicago. I walked without purpose. Past small bookstores. Coffee shops. Dogs tied to benches. I saw couples argue softly in crosswalks. I saw people laugh too loud at bad jokes. I didn't envy any of them. I didn't feel outside their lives. I just didn't need to be inside them either. On the third morning, I smiled at the front desk clerk without realizing I had done it. By the fifth, I didn't flinch when someone asked if I was traveling alone. I was, but not in the way they thought. At night, I sat out on the balcony with a book I hadn't touched in years. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just held it open on my lap, while the wind turned the pages for me. I didn't need to fill the time. I just needed to feel it. I wasn't lonely. I was just alone. There's a difference. Loneliness is a hunger that waits to be fed. Aloneness is space you give yourself when you're finally done explaining why you deserve to exist in peace. I stopped checking for messages. I didn't wait for someone to ask how I was. I knew. And that was enough. There's a quiet kind of freedom in not needing to be understood. The absence of performance. The ability to move through a day without adjusting your tone. Your posture. Your story. I didn't make a list of who owed me apologies. I didn't daydream about them calling. I didn't hope they would say the right thing. Because even if they did, it wouldn't change what I already knew. I had been holding together something that never held me back. So I let it fall. And nothing collapsed in me when it did. I ate alone. Walked alone. Slept without checking the clock. I wrote a few notes in a journal. Not to process. But to remember. Not to explain. But to mark that I had arrived. Not in Denver. In myself. If you're still here, thank you for listening. And if any part of this story felt familiar, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like the extra person in your own family? Like no matter how much you gave, you were only invited when it was convenient. Have you ever shown up in love, only to find out you were left out of the frame? Because I've been there. Not just once, but in so many small moments that I almost stopped noticing. A missed thank you. A skipped seat. A photo where I'm behind the camera. Never in it. The slow fading of someone who never shouted, but always showed up. And if that's you too, I want you to know this. You're not imagining it. You're not too sensitive. You're not selfish for wanting to be treated like more than a function. You deserve to be seen as whole, even when you're not holding everything together. I spent years trying to earn space in rooms I helped build. I believed that if I stayed silent, if I didn't cause waves, they would see me as good, as worthy. But all silence did was teach them where to place me out of the shot, out of the way, just close enough to be useful. So here's what I've learned. The hard way. Silence might keep the peace, but it can cost you your place. And the longer you let yourself shrink, the easier it becomes for others to forget you were ever standing tall to begin with. If any part of you feels unseen, uninvited, uncelebrated, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. Even if it's just a sentence. Tell me what made you feel erased. Or tell me what helped you come back. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. And if this video made you feel just a little more visible, even for a moment, let me know by leaving a comment. Or tell me where you're watching from. Or just say, me too. Because sometimes all we need is to know we weren't the only ones left out of the picture.